We sort of pride ourselves that we've brought regions in Kenya that hardly are talked about, from Machakos, Meru, Rift Valley. We've got Nandi, Kericho, where nobody ever thought that these regions would do coffee production, but we've seen phenomenal coffees from the Nandi farmers and the Kericho farmers. There's regions like Kitale as well. So for me, as I mean, you know that the other thing I'm passionate about is storytelling. So I'm just like, the moment I look at the map of Kenya, I'm like, what's the story that we can tell about Kenya? And
Mhm.
nowadays, I always try and talk to buyers and importers with a sense of how can I take you on a journey through Kenya using coffee.
Mhm.
Today you're in Machakos, tomorrow you're in Meru, next day you're in Kisii, the next day you're in Nandi, the next day you're in Uasin Gishu, like Kipia County, the next day. So that is, and using imagery, you know how strong images are.
Mhm.
And I think, with what happened during COVID, I think a lot of people have been longing, to sort of just get back out there and, visit countries again. But I'm like, for those that can't, you can take this journey through coffee all day, every day, and look at these beautiful images, read a book by an author from Kenya, from that place. So it's a new way. I would say it's a new direction of how we really market coffee beyond just your typical photo of a cup of coffee, a farmer with dirty hands holding coffee cherries, which is that image which has been perpetuated over time through
Mhm.
one particular lens, the lens of that buyer that is, from the consuming world.
Right. So what I love and what we're discovering, and what I'm passionate about really getting out is the bounty, the resources that Africa has. And there's coffee, right? And then we've been talking about chocolate, almost the same thing in terms of the cacao farmers and really
Yeah,
getting that going. So let's dig into it if you don't mind. Who
sure.
was we know from like chocolate that it was, it was going over to Europe, right? And then it was made into this luxury chocolate and
Hmm.
those countries over there. So who
Hmm.
was buying, you was sort of in this coffee industry, not
Hmm.
paying fair wage, all that stuff. And now you've come in and disrupt that, right? Because
Yeah.
now you are educating the Kenyan farmers, letting them know your crops are worth this and
Hmm.
making that a fair trade. What was going on, if you don't mind us getting into that a little bit, that now, again, like I said, you're disrupting that was going on and reclaiming, right? As a Kenyan, reclaiming Kenyan coffee.
Yeah, Africa being the richest continent, I think oftentimes, I feel that like the one reason I came back home was to give back power to my people, in the sense that, and to give them the confidence to know that not all of us have to go to Europe and never come back and give back. As like the one thing that I'm grateful for is the opportunity to travel around the world. My parents invested so much to educate us to that level that I wanted to give something back to the community, to my society,
Mhm.
by bringing back the knowledge and the exposure, and also showing young people and girls like myself that, um, for lack of a better way of saying it, I'll pull a Lupita and say my dreams are valid, your dreams are valid. Like you can dream to run an industry and one day actually shake up that industry and have people notice that you're doing something, no matter
Mhm.
how small you are. So I'm well aware of the fact that everything you need is here in Africa. Everything. you know, um, and it's we've lived such an extractive lifestyle, and everything is taken, made into something else over there and brought back. So for me, I've tried to sort of be, what do you call it, like end to end, in that we're producers, we can roast the coffee, we can package it, we can brand it. It really doesn't have to live there. But the only issue we've had with coffee is the fact that we don't consume that much coffee in
Mhm.
Kenya or in Africa.
Mhm.
So inherently, because of the percentage consumption,
Right.
we still need to export that coffee. But it is such a viable industry to build, because when you build industries, you create employment. We keep talking about unemployment in Africa, like I've never, like, that's a discussion I've had ever since I was a child.
Mhm,
Percentage of unemployment. It's like, and the youth, there's like more than 45% unemployment in Kenya with the youth.
mhm.
And it's increasing. It's increased during the times of COVID. And we're not being creative as Africans in creating other sectors young people can aspire to work in. So, how do we make sectors like agriculture more attractive for
Right,
youth to work in? Um, People like to say, let's make agriculture sexy. I don't think that it's a matter of making it sexy. It's a matter of making it an income worthy industry for young people and people of all ages who aspire to get a job. Like, how do we make these industries more attractive and more lucrative to everyone, from the farmer? How do you, and we start from the ground. It's like, this farmer, if they elevate the coffee crop, if they're producing a coffee that's scoring 80 plus, the coffee definitely has a home. But also, let's change how policy affects all of us who work in industry for the better.
mhm,
Because the current policy we actually operate under in the coffee industry is still quite colonial. It was set up by the British in like 1948, and there's so many of those things that we're still using to inform how we operate as Kenyan traders, which is really not fair. And if
okay,
any young person really wants to be an entrepreneur in the coffee industry, it's tough. It's like the capital is just a hurdle.
right,
The equipment, all of that, it requires hefty investment, which a lot of young people shy away from, and they can really not do those things. And I'm like, I find today that even the government sort of gets off easy by saying, let's create, let's support entrepreneurs, people who want to set up their own businesses, so that they can create employment. But I'm like, no, government should also be, playing a key role in creating employment. And I know I'm digressing sort of, but I'm like, it sort of hits on the point of because there's nothing we can do without government support in terms of growing these sectors, because they influence a lot of the policy that we complain
right,
about,
right.
especially in the ag sector, in food, in manufacturing. So my ask has always been, if we had people in government that understood coffee, for example, or how industry works or value addition, we would be further on. But unfortunately, oftentimes, with, I would say, with the way government operates, it's people who really don't have a clue about these sectors that are put in, maybe because of nepotism or
Mm,
favoritism or whatever.
mhm,
And I'm not saying that the entire government is composed of people that are not knowledgeable, but oftentimes, especially for my sector, you find that on the policy level, people just don't understand how what consumers or the end consumer wants and what the farmer wants. So
right,
then we often are wasting time in boardrooms, having meetings, going back and forth and really not moving forward on how can we really elevate this industry so that they can help the locals, help farmers, help the youth, help,
I understand,
like, really transform, an entire sector. So for
right.
me, that's always been the pinpoint. And to be honest with you, Cherie, I always wanted to do policy, but then I discovered that I'm not a good politician. I was just like, you're like a politician with no patience. Like,
Okay, I know.
you're like, you've got zero patience for to play politics. So I was like, my investment can only be in creating and educating, like creating jobs,
Right.
educating where I can. But often enough, the struggle has always been, where do we get these resources to keep investing as private sector? It's tough, and especially as young people that come back, it's like the systems just don't work, in your favor many times.
Wow. So let's talk about, what makes good coffee. Like with wine, it's the soil, it's all of that. So when you say you're working with farmers to really make sure that you're yielding that harvest that's going to yield that coffee, what are some of the things that you're working with the farmers on to do that, to produce that product?
Coffee and wine are very similar, so you've answered part of that question. It's
Hey.
it's the soil. The soil is everything. To be honest with you, it's the soil. Soil has such a huge role in the final taste of your coffee.
Mhm.
And I would say how much you love and nurture your soils is so key, because if you feed your soil with poison, you get poison.
Mm,
If you don't put enough nutrients and the percentage of nutrients. So one thing that we've done with farmers is ensure that all the farmers we work with have gotten like soil testing done season to season, every season. If they're thinking of planting new seedlings or grafting the coffee, we provide the expertise. We've worked with agronomists from Colombia who've done trainings with us in Kenya. And I mention that because Colombia is so ahead when it comes to actually farmer support.
Okay.
The FNC, which is the Federación Nacional de Cafeteros, has invested so much money in research that it's like one of the best libraries of coffee knowledge ever. If anyone just thought to dig deep, and that's so I was lucky enough to work with my Colombian partner, who we set up the Gente del Futuro project with, and he introduced me to his team of agronomists who've done amazing work in Tanzania and introduced processing methods which had never been, practiced in Africa before. So we've copied some of that with my farmers, and the agronomists spent about on and off like 2 weeks continuously just meeting groups of my farmers, just troubleshooting, informing them of better ways of you know, uh, nourishing the crops, and also technology for farmers, like simple tools like how do you measure the moisture content so that your coffee is drying to the right percentage that is required for export and you're not under drying or whatever, because coffee is such a science and such an intricate, delicate craft.
Sounds like earth science.
I'm like, people need to respect their cup of coffee. Like, you have to respect a good coffee because the labor of love, my friend, is like so intense. Like, and I always tell people, any filmmaker or any photographer who spent time with us on the farm leaves having massive respect for coffee, because you can imagine the weather is against you, it's raining, you can't dry the coffee. You have to, like in areas like Rift Valley where the rain patterns right now with climate change, rain is so erratic, like you can't tell what is happening when the rain is coming, and sometimes flowering is delayed for coffee, and sometimes drying takes longer than usual. So some of our farmers have invested in like greenhouse type of structures,
Okay.
where they can keep drying the coffee, but that also requires massive investment. And then you have to have really knowledgeable people on the ground to like monitor the content and everything. And sometimes some farmers are better than others in that others have also sort of invested in the team if they're not there, so that the team does not mess up the harvest, because a harvest can go really bad if
Mhm.
if if certain things go wrong, like processing, fermentation, um, all of those things. So other than soil, there's the post-harvest processes that are so key. It's how long do you want to soak your coffee cherries? What process are you using? How long are the coffee cherries going to sit in the fermentation tank?
Oh, wow.
Um, all of those things. And for example, for us this past season, we've been experimenting with natural coffees, which use less water. And then we've got the semi-washed coffees where it's like half, we call it honey process, where it's semi-washed. So you use part water, part, just cut down the water, and you sort of, we just call it semi-wash. Like, you just have to wash the process. And so it becomes like a honey process because um what do you call it, like part of the skin is still attached
Oh,
to the coffee, so it also now produces a different flavor to the coffee that
wow.
some people love. So coffee is like wine, because I know even in wine as well, there's people who experiment with yeast, like
Mhm.
yeah, yeast, what kind of yeast do you want to use, and how many hours of soaking and all of
Correct.
that. So coffee and wine are like, in bed together, like it's so similar. Um and and that is why we are puzzled as coffee people, that people argue on the price of coffee and they don't argue about the price of a bottle of wine.
Right.
But I feel like wine people got their marketing right, like maybe that's why, because with wine, if I'm selling a bottle of wine for like $3,000, no one's going to question it because it explains the whole process. But try selling a bag of a naturally processed Kenyan coffee for that much, people will be like, nah, I'm not paying that for coffee, because coffee should be cheap, and it shouldn't.
And not like you said, not understanding the process and what it goes through, and there you
Yeah,
go. How many
yeah.
farmers do you work with?
It varies season to season. When I started, we're about like 30,000 producers,
Wow.
on and off, but each season it varies because we add on co-ops and sometimes miss out on some co-ops. And a co-op has about, on average, 1,200 to 2,000 producers.
Okay.
So, for example, if this past season, I would say about 18,000 producers, and we're definitely increasing that number this because this is we are in the season that is Kenya's busiest season,
Okay.
and right now we're sourcing from about like 20 different co-ops and like 30 smaller states. So if you do the numbers, it'd probably be about maybe 25, 28,000 producers on
Wow.
average.
That
Yeah.
is amazing. Let's go to the day where you released your first, I don't know, I want to, what do you call your first batch that you were exporting it off, and this is like, oh my goodness, it just got really, really real now. What was that day like for you?
Stressful but also joyful. It
Oh,
was, I couldn't believe that it was, to be honest, the journey to becoming an exporter has been the, I think the hardest thing I ever gave energy and whatever to.
makes childbirth look like a breeze, huh?
Childbirth is easy. Childbirth, like you kind of, you're there sitting for 9 months and then you just pop the baby and it's fine.
Okay.
Hey, coffee export, my friend, is like, Lord, like the documentation required, first of all, like the paperwork. And here I was just like, COVID taught me so many things. And I think it took the slap of COVID or what happened during COVID for me to really get bright ideas of how to restructure my business.
Right, right,
But before that, I was trying to do everything. I was trying to do everything. I'm tasting the coffee, so I'm the one that has to pick the coffee. I'm the one going to the farms. I'm the one going to the warehouse. I'm the one, like, filling out all the paperwork. I was just like, Lord, okay, there's got to be like a better way to do this. And then I made so many mistakes, Sherry, so
mm,
many mistakes that I think, if it wasn't for the mistakes, I would not have become, there would not have been a eureka moment or a light bulb moment
right.
the first year of COVID. I would still be making the same mistakes and spending so much money.
Mhm.
I I regret those mistakes purely because I'm like, I mean, I'm not gonna say I wasted resources, but I wish I had utilized the little resources we had better.
Right.
I wish that I'd had better mentorship because that's something that is so hard to find in coffee, especially in
I
a
was gonna
producing
ask you if
country.
you do. Were you seeing anyone that looked like you?
Nah, at that point, no. Now I have a strong team. Now I have good mentors. Now I can have time in Lamu to set up something else because I guess the universe kind of like brought me to like a point of realization, and I was like, okay, I need to do things differently. But I have lost money, a lot of it, made money, lost it, invested in the wrong team members, invested in the wrong type of things that, but I'm grateful for it because it's brought me to where I am.
Right.
And you ask about the feeling of that day when we first shipped our first consignment. It was small. It was 20 bags,
Okay.
um, to one of my best clients to date, who's like family, and they believed in me and they gave me the opportunity. And from that, we grew, but I could have done it better. But I was just happy that I was shipping 20 bags and I was excited. It was not a big check, but it was like that is just saying, I'm an exporter. I have shipped
Right.
coffee. I'm happy. My coffee has landed, whatever. It felt so good. But to be honest with you, I I don't, what was I doing? I don't know. I
Right.
was learning. It
Well,
was
you
like
know
the
what?
best.
You were doing what you knew what to do at the time. And that's how, because I think as entrepreneurs, we all have those moments of, I even look back, like you said, wasted money on the wrong people and the wrong resources, this and that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to give myself some grace. I did what I knew what to do at the time. And now
Yeah, you're, yeah. Yeah, you said it right. It's like give yourself some grace. And I did what I had to do and what I knew to do at the time.
Right. Yeah.
But now looking back, I'm like I'm so much more like informed and
Mhm.
smarter that and more confident like in saying yes and no to things